Hello, my name is Lanray. Welcome to my channel. Today, I'd like to talk about grief. This is a topic I feel like a lot of us don't like to discuss grief and dying. Um, we've all heard the saying that no one leaves here alive. So, we are all going to go through dying, death, grief. The longer we live, the possibility of us actually dealing with it. And I wonder why we don't like talking about it. I've heard someone say, um, talking about dying is inevitably talking about living. And I so agree with that. The reason why this topic is now so much close to my heart is because 8 months ago, we lost our mom. Even me saying that the word lost, I still find it difficult to use that word. We lost our mom. Did we really lose her? Our mom passed away. She was 73 years old. She had been ill for a while. So I wouldn't say that it was expected, just because for a long time my mom was really, really, really bent on and believing for a miracle, which we all agreed with her. And we all had this hope that things were going to turn all right, as in she wasn't going to die, at least not now. Um, but unfortunately, on the 29th of February 2024, my mom passed away. Even the word passed away seems very weird to use. Now, this isn't my first time or my first experience with a parental death. 15 years ago, my father passed away suddenly in Nigeria, Ibadan. Um, I think the death of my father and the death of my mother seems very different in that I'm not sure if it's because my dad's death was really sudden. Um, for a long time, I was so angry. I was angry. I questioned everything. Um, and also, I feel like maybe because it's been 15 years ago, not that the loss is no longer there, but it's not as sharp. If that makes any sense, it's not as heavy as it was when it first happened. But my mom died 8 months ago, and this feels very different. I was talking to a friend of mine who'd also lost her mom um, a few years ago, a couple of years ago, and she described it as it feels like you are no longer anchored, like you've lost your connection to source. If that makes any sense, she said it felt like, or it feels like she had lost her anchor and she feels very unsteady. And I think that was the best way to describe how I feel. I think that's why it feels different from my dad. I am a dad's girl. I mean I wept for weeks and for months. I still cry about my dad now. But losing my mom feels different. It feels like, yeah, losing your anchor. It also feels like, I think mothers describe it as when they give birth to their children and the children starts to grow up and they start to leave the home, it feels like a piece of your heart is out there in the world. I feel like the reverse is the same when you lose your mom. It feels like a piece of your heart is gone. It feels like a piece of you is no longer here. And I think that's why it feels different from losing a father and losing a mother. Now, the reason why I'm recording this video and sharing this video is because, like I said, I feel like a lot of people aren't talking about it, even though we're all going to go through death, grief, dying. The longer you live, the higher the probability of you having to deal with death, dying, or grief. So I said to myself, if people aren't talking about it, I'm going to start talking about it. And I've made some points um, about what surprised me most about grief. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. The first thing is the loss of friendship, which I find really weird. I was talking to my brother, and he said, you know, when you post on social media, you've lost your mom, and people coming with like the greetings and sorry for your loss, and which is natural. People say, sorry for your loss, I'm so sorry, may she rest in peace, and all that. There were a few people who'd seen his story but did not respond. Now, these are people who know him. And I think I had similar experience where some people, a couple of people who had known, who have my personal numbers, who would chatted about stuff, about frivolous stuff, like, oh, what show are you watching at the moment? Whatever reality show, or what do you feel about this, and what do you feel about that? Oh, how you doing? I've just seen on your social media you've traveled here. For some reason, it was silence. It's like then I started to question my friendship with them. Like, if they had lost a family member, there was no way on earth I wouldn't reach out and send a message and, reach out and find out how they're doing. And so I found that really strange. But I wonder if anyone if anyone has actually gone through the same thing. Have you experienced it where you've lost friendship because you've lost a family member? Is it that people feel uncomfortable, they don't know what to say, or is it that they feel like associating with you brings them closer to experiencing death? I don't know. I found that really weird and very surprising. Um, the next thing I wrote down is the places where grief shows up, or how surprising the pain shows up. And what I actually mean by that is, you could be just be on the run. I speak for myself. The first time I stepped out of the house after we'd done the funeral and I've come back home, and after we went to Nigeria for the celebration of life, the first time that I left my house to go out into the world and live normally was really strange. I remember talking to my therapist that um, I felt exposed. I felt raw. It felt like I was was finding it difficult to get back or live normal or get back into society, if that makes any sense. Also, you could be going for a run. That happened to me as well. And I couldn't finish my run. I just burst out crying. I found that surprising as well. Also, there was one day a friend of mine, she just called me and said, "Oh, let's meet up for lunch." And we met up at a cafe for brunch, and we sat down while we were waiting for our menu. She just started to tear up. I'm thinking about that now. I'm starting to tear up. I started to tear up without saying anything. It's like she was crying about her loss. I was crying about my loss. It was after the brunch. I really appreciated that we didn't have to say anything. We just knew what it was. So I find that surprising where and how grief shows up and how it can show up at any time. It could be a smell. It could be you saw a picture or somebody says something, or you're watching something on TV and then you start to think about, oh, mom would have loved that, or it could be anything. I used to think about when the new phones come out, um, and there are new versions of the phone, and randomly I just think about, oh, what would dad think about that? He would have loved that. Whew. Also, I had a milestone birthday two 2 weeks ago, and I knew that was going to be really difficult because birthdays and Christmases and the big holidays are going to be difficult going forward. It just is. And my phone rang at 6 in the morning, and it was my auntie. She had called me to wish me a happy birthday, and that would have been the time that my mom would have called me as well. She would have called me very early in the morning, and I remember those years I'll be like, oh my God, I'm sleeping. Can you wait till like 7 or like 8 in the morning? But that was the thing she did. She would call like 5 or 6 in the morning and say her prayers and just pray for me. And I really appreciated my auntie doing that. I think that's another thing I miss most about mom is that I feel like who's going to be praying for me? Who? Yeah, that's the I think that's the worst part. Is that selfish? Like, okay, I miss my mom, but who's going to be praying for me? Who? Um, um so yeah. Another thing that surprised me about grief is the finality of it all. How final it is. Are you trying to tell me that I'll never, ever, ever, ever see my dad or my mom again? So there's the emotion of dealing with the finality of it all, like it's all final, a hope for reunion. So it depends on how, what your religious background is. For me, I was born into a Christian home. Um, I'm a Christian, even though I've had I've had so many questions and I question that a lot, especially with what's happened in my family and especially what's happening in the world. I've questioned that, but I still regard myself as a Christian. And you know, one of the things my mom was saying on her last few days was, to be absent in the body is to be present with the Lord and all of that stuff. So there is a hope of reunion that I have because I can't. Maybe that's how I deal with it. I can't even imagine never seeing my dad again. Crying again. I can't even imagine that, you know? So the finality of it all, like, wow. At least now we have videos and recordings. I was talking to my siblings and like, how our parents guide us and protect us because they've been through the same thing that we're going through now, losing their parents. And it must have been hard for them because okay, so they have pictures, but they didn't have like video recordings of their grandparents, for instance. At least for us, we've got video recordings, audio tapings. Not as much for my dad. We've got a few like voicemails. I play that every now and again. Um, you know, I've got loads of videos of my mom and because her death is more recent. So, like on her phone, there are loads of videos and pictures that you can look back on. But the fact that I would never be able to pick up my phone and call my mom again, that is really hard to accept. Really hard. And then another thing that surprised me is how I find myself considering other people's feelings. So I feel uncomfortable. Like, okay, I'm talking about my parents and I'm crying. Can you imagine doing that with you're sitting down at, well, I sat down with a friend of mine, like I said, for brunch. But after a while, I feel people get tired of listening to that. So I find myself considering other people's feelings before mine, which I don't think is good. Because, like I said, my mom lived to be 73, my dad lived to be 62. And each of those lives and the years that they lived mattered. So if all I'm doing is shedding a few tears, I think it's worth it. 72 years, 73 years, 62 years of them living here and remembering them every now and again and shedding the tears, I feel is worth it. And I shouldn't have to feel uncomfortable about tearing up. And if you're my friend or you're my family, then you should be able to just accept that and sit in it. And I think people feel uncomfortable about sitting in discomfort. Yeah, that surprised me. Um, Another thing, and lastly, that surprised me is I keep talking about my mom and my dad, especially my mom because it's more recent in present tense. I'll say, oh, especially when I'm talking to my siblings, I'll be like, oh, mom said, or mom would have said, or mom will say this, and or dad says this, and or if I'm talking to someone, my dad is, I'd never be able to say my dad was. I just don't know. Because there's a part of me that believes they're here with me, even as I'm sat here with you. Because we're all living beings, we live forever. And that's why I have a problem with the words we use, with dying, which is passed away, lost. And because the truth is, as I believe, that you haven't really lost anyone. The only difference is that they're not here physically in physical form. It's like they're next door, but you can't see them. They're here with you. They're part of your DNA in your bloodstream, and they're part of our lives, and their life and their existence means something, and they're part of our being, and that's what comes up with the tears and the remembering. It's all part of it. And I hope this video was useful for you. I hope it touches you. I hope if you're watching it, it's because you're meant to be seeing this. And I hope that it touches you as you're sitting in your room or wherever you are listening in your cars, that if you've lost somebody so close to you, that you feel them today, you feel their love and you feel their affection, and that you haven't lost anyone, you haven't lost anything. If anything, they are as strong, if not stronger, now that they're no longer with you in physical form. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.